Emma Walsh stood on the dock at Camp Cedar Lake, watching the sunrise paint the water gold and trying not to think about how this might be her last summer here. The camp that had saved her life 15 years ago was dying, and she was powerless to stop it. At 28, Emma had poured everything into becoming the head counselor at Cedar Lake. This place had given a broken foster kid hope, purpose, and the closest thing to family she'd ever known. The camp director, Mrs. Patterson, had become the mother Emma never had. The other counselors were her chosen siblings, and the kids who came here each summer, the misfits, the troubled ones, the forgotten ones, they were why she got up every morning. But love couldn't pay the bills. Emma pulled out the foreclosure notice she'd been carrying for 3 days, the paper already worn from folding and unfolding. 60 days. That's all they had left unless someone came up with $200,000 to cover the debt accumulated over years of putting kids' needs before profit. Thinking won't make it go away, you know. Emma turned to find Marcus Chen, her best friend and fellow counselor, approaching with 2 cups of coffee from the mess hall. "I know," she said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "I just keep hoping if I stare at it long enough, the numbers will change." "Any word from potential investors?" Emma shook her head. "Who wants to invest in a summer camp that barely breaks even? Mrs. Patterson's been trying for months. The banks won't extend our credit, the state won't provide additional funding, and every private investor wants to turn this place into luxury lakefront condos." Marcus sat beside her on the dock, his expression as grim as hers. "What about that anonymous inquiry from last week? The one asking about our debt structure?" "Probably another developer looking to buy us out cheap." Emma's voice was bitter. "They all want the land, not the camp." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the lake that had been their sanctuary for years. Emma remembered her first summer here at 13, angry, defensive, convinced everyone would abandon her eventually. But Mrs. Patterson had seen past the armor to the scared girl underneath. And Jake. Emma pushed that thought away. She hadn't let herself think about Jake Morrison in years. The rich boy who'd been sent to camp as punishment, who'd somehow seen past her foster kid status to the real her. The boy who'd promised to write, to visit, to come back for her someday. The boy who'd disappeared from her life without explanation after that magical summer. "Emma," Marcus's voice pulled her back to the present. Car coming up the drive. Emma squinted toward the main road, where a sleek black SUV was kicking up dust on the camp's gravel entrance. Too early for campers. Maybe it's Mrs. Patterson coming back from town. But as the vehicle drew closer, Emma could see it wasn't Mrs. Patterson's ancient station wagon. This was expensive, pristine, the kind of car that screamed money. "Great," she muttered. "Another vulture coming to pick over our corpse." She had no idea that the man stepping out of that SUV was about to change everything.
Welcome to another episode of Ever After. Kindly comment where you are listening from and subscribe so you don't miss out on our next episode.
Chapter 1. Emma fights to save the struggling camp. The man who emerged from the black SUV was tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing clothes that probably cost more than Emma made in a month. Dark hair, strong jaw, expensive sunglasses that hid his eyes. He looked like every other wealthy developer who'd come sniffing around their property. Emma stood up from the dock, unconsciously squaring her shoulders for battle. Beside her, Marcus muttered, "Here we go again." The stranger approached with confident strides, his gaze taking in the camp's worn buildings, the patched canoes, the dock that listed slightly to one side. Emma could practically see him calculating property values and development costs. "Ms. Walsh?" His voice was deep, cultured, with just a hint of familiarity that Emma couldn't place. "I'm Jake Morrison. I believe Mrs. Patterson mentioned I'd be stopping by." Emma's heart skipped at the name, but she forced herself to stay focused. Lots of people were named Jake. This couldn't possibly be. "Mr. Morrison," she said coolly, not extending her hand. "Mrs. Patterson's in town, but I'm the head counselor. If you're here about buying the property, I can save you some time. We're not selling." Jake pushed his sunglasses up, revealing bright blue eyes that seemed to study her with unnerving intensity. Actually, I'm not here to buy anything. I'm here because I already own something. What's that supposed to mean? It means I purchased your debt from Cascade Bank last week. All of it. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. That's impossible. I have the paperwork in my car if you'd like to see it. Jake's voice was maddeningly calm. $237,000 in outstanding loans plus accumulated interest. As of Monday, I hold the mortgage on Camp Cedar Lake. You can't just... Who are you? Emma's voice rose with panic and fury. What kind of person buys debt from strangers? The kind who believes in second chances, Jake said quietly. Marcus stepped forward protectively. Emma, maybe we should call Mrs. Patterson before— No! Emma snapped, her green eyes blazing as she faced Jake. I want to know what you want. Money? The land? What's your angle here, Mr. Morrison? I want to help. Emma laughed bitterly. Right. Let me guess. You'll graciously allow us to stay if we agree to your terms. Turn the camp into some luxury retreat for rich kids? Actually, I was thinking more along the lines of debt forgiveness. The words hit Emma like a physical blow. What? I'd like to forgive the debt entirely. Make the camp solvent again. Maybe even provide additional funding for improvements. Jake glanced around at the facilities that clearly needed updating. This place could use some investment. And what do you want in return? Jake's smile was enigmatic. Just the chance to spend the summer here. As a volunteer. Emma stared at him suspiciously. In her experience, rich men didn't give away hundreds of thousands of dollars without expecting something in return. You want to volunteer at a summer camp for troubled kids? Why? Let's just say I have some experience with being a troubled kid myself. There was something in his voice, a note of old pain that resonated despite Emma's distrust. But she'd learned long ago not to trust promises that seemed too good to be true. I need to think about this, she said finally. And talk to Mrs. Patterson. Of course, I'll be staying at the Lakeside Inn in town. Take all the time you need. Jake turned to leave, then paused. Emma, this place meant something to me once. I'd like the chance to give back. As he drove away, Emma sank back onto the dock, her mind reeling. Well, Marcus said finally, that was unexpected. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that Jake Morrison was more than he seemed. The question was, would trusting him save Camp Cedar Lake or destroy everything she held dear? Chapter 2. Jake arrives as the mysterious debt buyer. 3 days later, Jake Morrison returned to Camp Cedar Lake with a moving truck and enough camping gear to outfit an expedition. Emma watched from the arts and crafts cabin as he efficiently set up a high-end tent in the staff camping area, moving with the kind of purposeful confidence that spoke of outdoor experience. He's really staying, observed Sarah Kim, the arts counselor, from beside Emma at the window. Mrs. Patterson okayed it? Apparently. Emma's voice was tight with frustration. Mrs. Patterson had been over the moon about Jake's offer, seeing it as an answer to her prayers. She'd barely listened to Emma's concerns about accepting charity from a stranger with unclear motives. Look, I know you're suspicious, Mrs. Patterson had said during their heated discussion the night before. But Emma, we're out of options. If Mr. Morrison wants to save the camp, who are we to say no? We're the people who've dedicated our lives to this place, Emma had replied. We should have a say in who gets to swoop in and play savior. But Mrs. Patterson's mind was made up. Jake Morrison was their angel investor, whether Emma liked it or not. Now, watching him competently set up camp like he belonged here, Emma felt a confusing mix of resentment and reluctant admiration. At least he wasn't expecting luxury accommodations. You know, Sarah said thoughtfully, there's something familiar about him. Like I've seen him somewhere before. Emma's pulse quickened. Really? Where? I can't place it. Maybe he just has one of those faces. A commotion from the main lodge interrupted their speculation. The first group of campers had arrived, 12 kids between ages 10 and 16, all dealing with various challenges. Emma's protective instincts kicked in immediately. These were her kids, the reason she did this job, and she'd be damned if some rich stranger was going to disrupt their summer. She strode across the compound toward the chaos where Marcus was trying to organize luggage while kids ran in every direction, high on freedom and sugar from the bus ride. Emma, 10-year-old Zoe Martinez, launched herself into Emma's arms with typical enthusiasm. "I missed you so much. Did you get my letters? I learned to braid friendship bracelets." "I got every single letter," Emma assured her, hugging the energetic girl who'd been coming to camp for 3 years. "And I can't wait to see those bracelets." "Who's the new guy?" asked Tyler, a 14-year-old who'd aged out of foster care the previous year. His tone was suspicious, wary, the same way Emma felt about Jake. Emma followed Tyler's gaze to see Jake approaching with a lost-looking boy who couldn't be more than 11. The kid was clearly overwhelmed, clutching a ratty backpack and trying not to cry. "This is Ben," Jake said when he reached them. His bus got mixed up, so he ended up on the wrong route. I gave him a ride from town. Ben looked up at Emma with huge brown eyes. "Are you the head counselor? My social worker said to find you." Emma's heart clenched. Another foster kid. Another chance to make a difference. "I'm Emma, and yes, I'm the head counselor. Welcome to Cedar Lake, Ben." As she knelt to Ben's level, Emma was acutely aware of Jake watching the interaction. When she glanced up, something in his expression made her breath catch, a tenderness that seemed far too personal for a stranger. "Nice work," she said grudgingly as Ben was swept into the group by the other kids. "Thank you for helping him." "Of course," Jake replied. "We all need someone to help us find our way sometimes." The way he said it, looking directly at her, made Emma wonder if he was talking about more than just a confused 11-year-old. Chapter 3. Jake helps around camp. While hiding his identity. By the end of the first week, Emma had to grudgingly admit that Jake Morrison was not what she'd expected from a millionaire philanthropist. Instead of hovering around making suggestions or getting in the way, he'd quietly integrated himself into camp life with surprising skill. He was up before dawn, helping prep breakfast in the kitchen. He knew how to fix the temperamental water heater in cabin 7. When the dock started listing more dangerously to the left, he appeared with tools and expertise, working alongside Marcus to shore up the supports. "Where did you learn carpentry?" Emma asked, finding him repairing loose boards on the chapel steps during rest hour. "Here and there," Jake replied, not looking up from his work. "You pick things up." It was the same vague answer he gave to most personal questions. Emma knew virtually nothing about him beyond his name and his apparent wealth. He deflected inquiries about his business, his family, his past, with the skill of someone who'd had lots of practice avoiding personal topics. "The kids love him," Sarah observed as they watched Jake leading a group in what appeared to be an intense discussion about superhero physics. "Especially the boys. They've been following him around like puppies." It was true. Tyler, who trusted no adults on principle, had started seeking Jake out for advice about everything from girls to college plans. Ben, still shy after a week, had attached himself to Jake with the determination of a barnacle. Even some of the more challenging kids, the ones who usually tested every boundary, seemed to respect him instinctively. "He's good with them," Emma admitted reluctantly. "I just wish I knew why he was really here." "Maybe he's exactly what he appears to be," Marcus suggested, joining them on the mess hall porch. "A rich guy who wants to give back." "Nobody gives away hundreds of thousands of dollars out of the goodness of their heart," Emma said. "There's always an angle." "Spoken like a true foster kid," Marcus teased but gently. "Not everyone has ulterior motives, Em." Emma wanted to believe that, but experience had taught her to be cautious. In her world, people who seemed too good to be true usually were. "Emma!" Zoe came running up, breathless with excitement. "Jake said he'll teach us to build a tire swing, can we, please?" "If Jake thinks it's safe," Emma said, looking toward where Jake was examining a sturdy oak tree near the lake. "He knows about knots and everything," Tyler added, having appeared with his usual silent stealth. He showed us how sailors tie rope. It was pretty cool. As the kids dragged Jake off to scout swing locations, Emma found herself studying his movements. There was something familiar about the way he walked, the tilt of his head when he was thinking. But every time she almost grasped the memory, it slipped away. "You know what's weird?" she said to Marcus. "Sometimes when he's with the kids, especially when he's teaching them something, he reminds me of..." "Of who?" Emma shook her head, frustrated. "I can't put my finger on it. Someone I used to know, maybe." If she'd been paying closer attention, she might have noticed the way Jake's eyes found her across the camp throughout the day, or the wistful expression that crossed his face when he thought no one was watching. But Emma was too busy protecting her heart to see that it might already be in danger. Chapter 4. Growing attraction and camp memories surface. The campfire crackled between them as the last of the evening's activities wound down. Most of the campers had been herded off to their cabins for lights out, leaving only a handful of older kids and the counseling staff gathered around the dying flames. Emma sat cross-legged on a log, roasting marshmallows for s'mores, and half listening to Marcus tell increasingly embellished stories about his disastrous attempts at rock climbing. Across the fire, Jake sat with Ben curled up against his side, the 11-year-old fighting sleep with the determination of a child who didn't want the day to end. "Tell the one about the haunted canoe," Zoe demanded, her eyes bright with the thrill of staying up past bedtime. "Oh no," groaned Tyler, but he was grinning. "Not the haunted canoe story." Emma found herself smiling as Marcus launched into the camp's most beloved ghost story, a tale about a phantom canoe that appeared on the lake during the full moon, carrying the spirit of a counselor who died trying to save a drowning camper decades ago. "Complete nonsense, of course," Marcus said with theatrical seriousness, "but every year someone swears they've seen it." "Have you ever seen it, Emma?" asked Maya, a 13-year-old who'd been coming to camp for 4 years. "Once," Emma said, surprising herself. She rarely shared this story. "It was my second summer here. I was 14, and I'd snuck out of my cabin because I couldn't sleep." She was aware of Jake's attention focusing on her, his blue eyes reflecting the firelight. Something about his expression made her pulse quicken. "I was sitting on the end of the dock and I saw this canoe gliding across the water without making a sound. No paddles, no motor, just moving like it was floating on air." Emma's voice dropped to match the spooky atmosphere. "For a second I could have sworn I saw someone sitting in it. A boy maybe, with dark hair." "Whoa," breathed Ben, now fully awake. "What did you do?" "I blinked and it was gone. Like it had never been there at all." "That's because it hadn't," said a new voice. Jake spoke for the first time in the story circle, his tone teasing, but somehow familiar. "You probably just saw moonlight on the water, city girl." The words hit Emma like a physical blow. City girl. She'd been called that exactly once in her life, by a boy who'd teased her mercilessly about her lack of outdoor skills during her first summer at camp. Emma's marshmallow fell into the fire as she stared at Jake, her heart hammering. "What did you call me?" Jake seemed to realize his mistake, his expression carefully neutral. "Sorry, you just seemed like someone who might be more comfortable with concrete than canoes." But Emma was studying his face now, really looking at him for the first time since he'd arrived. The strong jaw that had been soft and rounded 15 years ago. The blue eyes that had been hidden behind thick glasses. The broad shoulders that had once been skinny and awkward. "Oh my God," she whispered. Jake met her gaze across the fire, resignation and hope warring in his expression. "Hello, Emma," he said quietly. "It's been a while." Around them, the other counselors and campers continued chatting, oblivious to the seismic shift that had just occurred. But Emma felt like her world had tilted off its axis. Jake Morrison wasn't a stranger at all. He was Jake Sullivan, the rich boy who'd broken her 14-year-old heart. Chapter 5. Romantic moments and emotional connection deepen. Emma couldn't sleep. Hours after the revelation around the campfire, she lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling while her cabin mate Sarah snored softly across the room. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Jake's face, not as the confident millionaire he'd become, but as the awkward 15-year-old boy who'd been her first everything. First crush, first kiss, first heartbreak. Finally giving up on sleep, Emma slipped out of the cabin and made her way to the dock. The lake was mirror still under the full moon, and she sat where she'd been that morning, trying to process the impossible fact that Jake Sullivan had come back to Cedar Lake. "I thought I might find you here." Emma didn't turn around as Jake's footsteps approached on the wooden planks. "This was always my thinking spot. I remember." Jake sat beside her, careful to maintain some distance. "You used to come here whenever you were upset about something. And you used to follow me and try to cheer me up with terrible jokes. They weren't that terrible." Despite everything, Emma found herself almost smiling. Yes, they were. They were awful. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 15 years hanging between them. Finally, Emma spoke. "Why didn't you tell me who you were? Would you have let me stay if you'd known?" Emma considered that. Probably not. She'd spent years convinced that Jake had forgotten about her the moment he'd returned to his privileged world. Finding out he'd become exactly the kind of successful, wealthy man she'd always expected would have triggered every defense mechanism she possessed. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I wanted a chance to show you who I am now, not just remind you of who I was then." Jake's voice was quiet, careful. "The boy you knew was pretty messed up. So was the girl you knew. You were never messed up, Emma. You were just hurt. There's a difference." The tenderness in his voice made her chest tight. "Why did you really buy the debt? And don't say it's about giving back." Jake was quiet for so long that Emma thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his words were barely above a whisper. "Because this place gave me you. Even if it was only for one summer, even if I screwed it up afterward, that summer changed my life, and I wanted to make sure other kids got the same chance." Emma's breath caught. "Jake, I know you have every right to hate me. I promised to write, to visit, to come back for you, and then I disappeared. I was 15 and scared and stupid, and I handled everything wrong." "Your parents found out about us," Emma said. It wasn't a question. She'd figured it out years ago. The sudden silence, the returned letters, the way he'd vanished from her life so completely. "They found out I was involved with a foster kid from the charity camp." Jake's voice was bitter. "They pulled me out immediately and shipped me off to boarding school in Switzerland. No phone, no internet, no contact with anyone from my old life. You could have found me when you got older. I tried. But by the time I was 18 and could look for you on my own, you'd aged out of the system. No forwarding address, no family to contact. You'd disappeared as completely as I had." Emma felt tears she'd held back for 15 years threatening to spill. "I waited for you. I kept thinking maybe your letters got lost or maybe something had happened to you." "Emma, I'm so sorry." When he reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. His fingers were warm, calloused from the work he'd been doing around camp, and achingly familiar. "I never stopped thinking about you," he said. "Even when I couldn't find you, even when I tried to move on and build a life, there was always this part of me that belonged to the girl who taught me what love felt like." Despite every rational thought telling her to be careful, Emma felt her walls beginning to crumble. "Jake, I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give," he said quickly. "I just want the chance to be in your life again, to be someone you can count on this time." Looking into his eyes, those same blue eyes that had captured her teenage heart, Emma felt 15 years old again, hopeful and terrified and completely, utterly lost. "This is complicated," she whispered. "The best things usually are." When Jake leaned closer, Emma didn't pull away. Their first kiss in 15 years was soft, tentative, tasting of memory and possibility. And for just a moment, Emma let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, some promises were worth keeping even when they came 15 years too late. Chapter 6. Intimate Moments and Growing Connection. The next few days passed in a haze of stolen moments and meaningful glances. Emma found herself hyper-aware of Jake's presence around camp. The way he laughed with the kids, the competent movements of his hands as he fixed things, the careful distance he maintained while still somehow making her feel like she was the only person in his world. They didn't talk about the kiss or what it meant. There were too many people around, too many responsibilities, too many years of hurt to navigate in the brief spaces between activities. But the awareness simmered between them like heat lightning on a summer evening. "You're distracted," Sarah observed as Emma fumbled the same bracelet pattern for the third time during arts and crafts. "Everything okay?" "Fine," Emma said too quickly. Across the room, Jake was helping Ben with a wood-burning project. His dark head bent close to the boys as he guided small hands around the tool. The sight did something dangerous to Emma's carefully guarded heart. "Uh-huh." Sarah's tone was knowing. "And I suppose that distraction has nothing to do with our mysterious benefactor?" Emma was saved from answering by Tyler's appearance at their table. "Emma, Jake said to tell you he's taking some of us on a night hike tonight. You coming?" "I don't know, I should probably." "She'll be there," Sarah answered for her, ignoring Emma's glare. "Won't you, Emma?" After dinner, a group of 8 older campers followed Jake and Emma into the woods surrounding the lake. The trail was familiar. Emma had walked it hundreds of times over the years, but somehow it felt different with Jake leading the way, his flashlight creating dancing shadows through the trees. "This is where we saw the owl last year," whispered Maya, pointing to a tall pine. "And where Tyler got lost for 2 hours because he was showing off," added Zoe, earning an indignant protest from Tyler. Emma found herself walking beside Jake as the group spread out along the trail, the kids' voices creating a comfortable backdrop of chatter and laughter. "You're good with them," she said quietly. "They trust you." "They trust you," Jake corrected. "I'm just following your lead." "That's not true. Ben barely spoke to anyone his first 3 days, and now he follows you around like a puppy. Tyler's been asking me for weeks if you're going to be our permanent outdoor skills counselor." Jake's smile was soft in the moonlight filtering through the canopy. "What did you tell him?" "That I don't know your plans beyond this summer." They walked in comfortable silence for a moment before Jake spoke again. "Emma, about that night when we were kids." "Which night?" But Emma knew exactly which night he meant. The last night of camp when they'd snuck away from the final campfire to watch meteor showers from the far side of the lake. "You said you loved me." Emma's cheeks burned with the memory. "I was 14. I thought I knew what love was." "Did you mean it?" The question hung between them in the soft summer air. Emma looked ahead to where the kids were debating whether a rustling bush contained a raccoon or a bear, their young voices bright with excitement and mock fear. "Yes," she said finally. "I meant it." "So did I when I said it back." Emma's breath caught. She'd wondered for years if those whispered words had been real, or just something her 14-year-old heart had imagined. "Jake, I know it's complicated. I know there's a lot of history and hurt between us. But Emma, what I felt for you then, it never went away. It just grew up." Before Emma could respond, Ben came running back down the trail, his flashlight bobbing wildly. "Emma, Jake, come quick, we found something amazing." As they hurried to catch up with the group, Emma caught Jake's hand in the darkness. It was a small gesture, almost unconscious, but it felt like the first step toward something she'd thought was lost forever. Maybe some kinds of love really could survive 15 years of separation. Maybe some promises were worth keeping, even when they came a decade and a half too late. Chapter 7. Emma discovers Jake's real identity and deception. Emma was in the camp office working on activity schedules when the phone call came that changed everything. Mrs. Patterson had been in town all morning, meeting with lawyers about the debt situation, and her voice was breathless with excitement when she called. "Emma, the most wonderful thing has happened. Mr. Morrison, Jake, he's not just any investor. Do you know who he really is?" "What do you mean?" Emma asked, though something cold was already settling in her stomach. He's Jake Sullivan. The Jake Sullivan who attended our camp 15 years ago. His family donated the money for our new arts and crafts building back then, remember? The Sullivans were one of our biggest sponsors before they moved overseas. Emma's world tilted sideways. Mrs. Patterson, I need to... He remembered you, dear. He specifically asked about you when he called to inquire about our financial situation. Isn't that wonderful? He came back for you, Emma. The phone slipped from Emma's numb fingers as the pieces fell into place with devastating clarity. Jake hadn't stumbled across their financial difficulties by accident. He hadn't bought their debt out of general philanthropy or even nostalgia for the camp. He'd done it for her. Because of her. Emma's hand shook as she pulled up the camp's financial records on the computer, searching through old donor files until she found what she was looking for. Sullivan Family Foundation. Hundreds of thousands of dollars donated over the years, all meticulously documented. Jake Sullivan wasn't just some rich kid who'd attended camp. His family had been major benefactors. They'd probably funded half the improvements that had been made during Emma's time as a counselor. Oh, God, she whispered, sinking into her chair as the full scope of the deception hit her. Jake hadn't just hidden his identity. He'd let her believe he was a stranger. He'd listened to her talk about the camp's financial struggles, about her fears of losing the place that meant everything to her, all while knowing he had the power to fix everything with a phone call. The office door opened and Marcus walked in, stopping short when he saw her expression. Emma? What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse, Emma said, her voice hollow. I've been played by an expert. She explained Mrs. Patterson's call while Marcus listened with growing understanding and sympathy. So he knew who you were the whole time? Marcus said when she finished. Not just knew. He came here specifically for me. This whole thing, the debt purchase, the volunteering, even letting me discover who he was by the campfire, it was all orchestrated. Maybe he genuinely wanted to help. With what? His guilt? Emma stood up abruptly, pacing to the window where she could see Jake teaching a group of kids how to tie knots. He felt bad about how things ended 15 years ago, so he decided to buy me a summer camp like some kind of elaborate apology gift. You don't know that's what this is, don't I? Emma's voice was rising with hurt and fury. He could have just called me, Marcus. Found me through social media, sent a letter, showed up at my apartment. But instead he bought our debt and manipulated the entire situation so I'd have to be grateful to him. Emma, you're spiraling. Maybe you should talk to him before... Before what? Before I realize that everything between us has been built on lies. Through the window she watched Jake ruffle Ben's hair as the boy successfully completed a complicated knot. The gesture was so gentle, so natural, that it made her chest ache. Had any of it been real? The conversations, the connection, the kiss by the lake? Or had she just been the object of an elaborate, guilt-driven rescue fantasy? I need some air, Emma said, grabbing her jacket. Where are you going? To figure out how to look at him without wanting to scream. As she headed for the door, Marcus called after her. Emma, for what it's worth, the way he looks at you, that's not guilt, that's love. But Emma was already gone, fleeing toward the woods where she could think clearly without Jake's presence clouding her judgment. Behind her, through the office window, Jake glanced up from his knot-tying lesson with a frown, as if sensing that something had fundamentally shifted in the careful balance they'd built over the past 2 weeks. He was right to be worried. Chapter 8. Confrontation about the past and present lies. Emma found Jake an hour later, sitting alone on the dock where they'd kissed just days before. The irony wasn't lost on her. This place that had been their sanctuary was now going to be the site of their reckoning. We need to talk, she said, her voice carefully controlled. Jake looked up from the water, and she could see in his expression that he knew. Somehow he'd figured out that their carefully constructed bubble had burst. Mrs. Patterson called, Emma continued when he didn't respond. She was very excited to tell me about the Sullivan Family Foundation and their long history of supporting Camp Cedar Lake. Jake's shoulders sagged. Emma, don't. She held up a hand to stop him. Just don't. I need to say this first, and then you can explain however you want to justify it. Jake nodded, his blue eyes never leaving her face. You didn't buy our debt because you're some philanthropic billionaire who stumbled across a struggling camp, Emma said, her voice growing stronger with each word. You bought it because you knew I worked here. You probably hired investigators to find me, didn't you? Tracked down where I'd ended up, learned about my life, my job, everything. Yes, Jake said quietly. The simple admission hit harder than any elaborate excuse would have. How long? How long have you known where I was? 3 years, maybe 4. Emma's breath caught. 4 years? You've known where I was for 4 years and you're just showing up now? I wanted to contact you, but I didn't know how. What was I supposed to say? Hi, remember me? Sorry I disappeared for 15 years, but my parents suck and I was a coward? You could have started with the truth. The truth? Jake stood up, his own temper finally flaring. The truth is that I've thought about you every day for 15 years. The truth is that I built my entire company thinking about what you'd say, what you'd think, whether you'd be proud of me. The truth is that when I finally found you again, I was terrified you'd slam the door in my face. So instead you bought your way into my life. I bought the camp's debt because I knew you'd never accept help from me personally. You're too proud, too independent. But you'd do anything to save this place and these kids. Emma stared at him, hurt and fury warring in her chest. You manipulated me. You manipulated the entire situation to get what you wanted. What I wanted was a chance to show you that I'm not the same scared, weak kid who let his parents control his life. A chance to prove that I'm someone worth trusting now. By lying to me from the moment you arrived? By giving you the choice, Jake shot back. If you'd known who I was from the beginning, would you have given me a chance? Be honest, Emma. She wanted to say yes, but they both knew it would be a lie. She would have sent him away immediately, too proud to accept what would have felt like charity from her teenage ex-boyfriend. That wasn't your choice to make, she said instead. You don't get to decide what's best for me, Jake. You don't get to orchestrate my entire life because you feel guilty about the past. This isn't about guilt, isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're trying to rewrite history. Buy me a camp, save the day, get the girl to fall for you again so you can feel better about being the rich boy who abandoned the foster kid. Jake flinched as if she'd slapped him. You think that's what this is? I think you're used to buying your way out of problems, and I was just another problem to solve. You were never a problem to solve, Emma. You were the only real thing in my life, and losing you nearly destroyed me. Then why didn't you fight for me? The question came out raw, filled with 15 years of hurt. When your parents found out about us, why didn't you fight? Because I was 15 and scared and completely dependent on them. Because they threatened to cut off my trust fund, disown me, destroy my future if I didn't comply. Because I was a coward who thought I had time to make it right later. And now? Are you still that coward, Jake? Jake met her eyes, and for a moment she saw the scared 15-year-old boy beneath the confident millionaire exterior. I don't know, he said honestly. I guess we're about to find out. Emma turned and walked away, leaving Jake alone on the dock with the wreckage of their second chance scattered around him like broken promises. Chapter 9. Jake proves his love is genuine, not obligation. Emma spent the night pacing her cabin, alternating between fury and heartbreak. By morning, she'd made her decision. Jake Morrison, Sullivan, whatever he wanted to call himself, could keep his money and his guilt. She'd find another way to save the camp, one that didn't involve accepting charity from someone who'd already broken her heart once. She was in the office before dawn, researching grant opportunities and loan restructuring options when Jake appeared in the doorway. Emma, please. I'm busy, she said without looking up from her computer. If you're here to pack up and leave, your tent is that way. I'm not leaving, and neither are you if I have anything to say about it. You don't, Emma said firmly. I've made my decision. I'm going to call Mrs. Patterson and tell her we're declining your generous offer. We'll find another way." "What other way?" Jake stepped into the office, his expression serious. "Emma, I've seen your financial records. You don't have other options. We'll figure it out. We always do. The camp will close. Then maybe it's supposed to close." Emma finally looked at him, her green eyes blazing. Maybe some things aren't meant to be saved by rich boys playing hero. Jake absorbed the barb without flinching. "You're right." Emma blinked, thrown off by his agreement. "What?" "You're absolutely right. The camp shouldn't be saved by some rich guy with a guilty conscience." Jake pulled out his phone and made a call. "Richard, it's Jake. I need you to transfer the Camp Cedar Lake debt back to Cascade Bank." "Yes, immediately." "No, I don't care about the loss, just do it." Emma stared at him in shock as he ended the call. "What did you just do?" "I gave you back your choice," Jake said simply. "The debt is back with the bank. My name is off the paperwork and you can figure out your own solution, without me." "Jake, that's financial suicide. You'll lose everything you put into this." "Maybe. Or maybe I'll prove that my feelings for you aren't about money or guilt or trying to rewrite the past." Jake's voice was quiet but steady. "Emma, I'm walking away from the financial rescue, but I'm not walking away from you. Not again." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm staying for the summer I promised. As a volunteer, nothing more. No money, no debt ownership, no strings attached. Just me, trying to earn back your trust the only way that matters, by being someone worthy of it." Emma's carefully constructed anger wavered. "The camp will still close." "Maybe. But if it does, it won't be because I swooped in and made the choice for you. It'll be because sometimes things end, and that's okay too." "You'd really give up your investment just like that?" "I'd give up everything for a chance to love you properly this time. Without manipulation, without guilt, without anything but what we choose to build together." Emma felt tears threatening for the first time since their fight. "Jake, I know I screwed up. I know I handled this all wrong, just like I handled everything wrong 15 years ago. But Emma, I'm not the scared kid I was then. I'm a man who spent half his life trying to become someone you could love, and I'm not giving up now. The kids will be devastated if the camp closes. Then we'll fight like hell to keep it open. Together. As equals. Not as benefactor and charity case." Despite every rational thought telling her to protect herself, Emma felt her walls beginning to crumble again. This is crazy. The best things usually are. When Jake reached for her hand, Emma didn't pull away. And when he promised again to stay and fight beside her, she almost believed him. Almost. Chapter 10. Emma chooses love and they save the camp together. 3 weeks later, Emma stood in front of the town council, her hands shaking as she presented their final appeal for municipal funding. Beside her, Jake sat quietly, offering moral support but letting her take the lead, just as he'd promised. True to his word, he'd transferred the debt back to the bank and stepped away from any financial involvement in the camp's future. But he'd also stayed, working alongside Emma to explore every possible avenue for keeping Cedar Lake open. Grant applications, fundraising drives, corporate sponsorship appeals. They'd pursued every option with the determination of people who had everything to lose. The camp serves 40 children each summer, Emma told the council members, her voice growing stronger as she spoke about the kids she loved. Many of them are from low-income families, foster care, or difficult home situations. For some of these children, Camp Cedar Lake is the only stability they have. She could see Jake in her peripheral vision, his presence a steady comfort, even as her future hung in the balance. "We're asking for a bridge loan of $100,000, she continued. Not a grant, a loan, to be repaid over 5 years through our expanded programming initiative. The expanded programming had been Jake's idea, though he'd been careful to present it as a suggestion rather than a directive. Corporate team-building retreats during the off-season, weekend family camps, adult adventure programs, ways to generate revenue while staying true to their mission. Councilwoman Martinez raised her hand. Ms. Walsh, what guarantees do we have that the camp will be financially viable long-term? Emma's heart sank. She'd prepared for this question, but the honest answer was that there were no guarantees. They were asking the town to take a leap of faith. None, she said simply. I can't promise you that we'll succeed, but I can promise you that we'll fight every day to make sure these kids have a place to belong. The council members exchanged glances, and Emma could see the no forming on their faces. Her chest tightened with the familiar sting of disappointment. Then Jake stood up. If I may, he said politely, I'd like to add something. Emma shot him a warning look. They'd agreed he would stay in the background, but he gave her a reassuring smile. My name is Jake Morrison, and I'm a volunteer at the camp this summer. 15 years ago, I was a camper at Cedar Lake. I was an angry, entitled kid whose parents had more money than sense, and I was headed for serious trouble. Emma watched in amazement as Jake spoke about his experience at camp, his voice raw with honesty. The counselors at Cedar Lake didn't see a rich kid acting out. They saw a boy who needed guidance, purpose, and someone to believe in him. That camp changed my life, and I know it's changing lives today. He looked directly at Emma. This woman has dedicated her life to making sure kids like I was have a chance to become something better. If you won't take a chance on the camp, take a chance on her. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Councilwoman Martinez smiled. Ms. Walsh, you have your loan. 2 hours later, Emma and Jake sat on their dock watching the sunset paint the lake gold. We did it, Emma said, still hardly believing it was real. You did it, Jake corrected. I just watched you save the world one kid at a time. Emma turned to look at him, really look at him. The boy she'd loved, the man he'd become, the partner he'd chosen to be. Jake? Yeah? I love you. Not the memory of you, not the fantasy of you. You. Right now. Exactly as you are. Jake's smile was brighter than the sunset. I love you too, Emma Walsh. For 15 years for right now, and for as long as you'll let me. When he kissed her, it tasted like promises kept and futures unlimited. So, Emma said when they broke apart, what happens now? Now we run a summer camp, Jake said. Together. And after summer? Jake's grin was pure mischief. After summer, we run a year-round adventure center, corporate retreat facility, and the best damn kids camp in the state. Is that your professional business opinion, Mr. Morrison? That's my personal promise, Ms. Walsh. As the stars began to appear over Cedar Lake, Emma realized she was exactly where she belonged. In the place that had shaped her, with the man who'd shaped her heart, ready to shape the future together. Some promises were worth waiting 15 years to keep. Epilogue. 1 year later, Emma stood in the same spot where she'd once feared losing everything, watching the controlled chaos of Cedar Lake's first annual community day. Children and families from 3 counties had come to celebrate the camp's transformation into a year-round facility serving everyone from troubled teens to corporate executives looking for team-building adventures. The obstacle course is a hit, Jake said, joining her with 2 cups of coffee. He wore a Cedar Lake staff t-shirt and jeans that had seen actual work, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. Ben designed half of it, Emma replied, watching their former camper, now a junior counselor, guide a group of kids through the rope climbing section. That boy has a gift for creative challenges. Like someone else I know. Emma smiled, accepting the coffee and leaning into Jake's warmth. The past year had been a whirlwind of construction, program development, and learning to balance their personal relationship with their professional partnership. It hadn't always been easy, but it had been worth every complicated moment. Any word from the Sullivan Foundation Review Committee? She asked. Jake's family foundation had formally partnered with Cedar Lake the previous fall, funding their expansion while carefully maintaining Emma's autonomy as director. It had taken months of negotiation to structure the relationship in a way that felt like partnership rather than charity. They're impressed, Jake said. The corporate programs exceeded projections by 40%, and the waiting list for summer camp is already full. Hard to believe we were facing closure 18 months ago. Hard to believe I almost lost you again by being an idiot about it. Emma laughed, remembering their early fights about everything from budget allocations to Jake's tendency to solve problems by throwing money at them. They'd learned to navigate their different approaches, building something stronger than either could have managed alone. Emma, Jake, Tyler jogged over, now 19 and a full-time counselor. The photography group wants to take the official staff picture before everyone heads home. They gathered with the dozen other year-round staff members in front of the main lodge, which bore a small plaque dedicating the building to Mrs. Patterson, who'd retired the previous spring to travel with her husband. "Everyone say Cedar Lake," called Maya, who'd returned as the photography instructor after graduating high school. As the camera clicked, Emma felt Jake's arm tighten around her waist. They'd both come so far from the scared teenagers who'd found love and lost it by this very lake. Now they were building something lasting, not just their relationship, but a legacy that would touch hundreds of lives. "Mrs. Morrison?" asked Zoe, now 13 and a counselor in training. "Are you and Jake going to have kids who come to camp here?" Emma blushed, very aware of the ring Jake had given her just weeks before. Not the elaborate diamond he could afford, but her grandmother's simple gold band that she'd mentioned missing during one of their late-night conversations. "We'll see," she said diplomatically. "Definitely," Jake said at the same time, grinning when Emma elbowed him in the ribs. As the crowds dispersed and the sun set over Cedar Lake, Emma realized she was living in the future her 14-year-old self had dreamed about but never dared believe possible. Sometimes the best love stories took 15 years to write properly. Some promises were worth the wait. The end.
Thank you for staying till the end. If you enjoy the video, please hit the like button, share, and comment. We'll love to hear from you.